I'd like to call the Finance Administration Committee meeting to order. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none, need a motion for the consent items, the approval of the agenda, and approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Support.
Any questions, changes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Need a motion for the statement of review.
So moved.
Support.
Questions, comments, additions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Need a motion for the Ottawa Conservation District.
I'd like to make a motion to approve. You want the whole motion read out?
No,
Okay, I'll make a motion.
okay,
All right, thank you.
I'll support that.
thank you. Questions, comments? John, this is just the yearly.
Well, no, it's not actually. And Megan Bose is here. She can, present maybe a little bit more detailed summary, but we have an existing agreement with the Ottawa Conservation District. Currently, we're providing $100,000 in funding towards the district. The agreement, since I think the very beginning, has a provision in there that if the state provides additional operating funds, then the Conservation District will refund to the county the amount that it was receiving extra from the state. So the state is sending one-time funds. Don't know if this will, it's never happened to my knowledge before, and don't know if it'll happen again, but they're sending an additional $40,000 to the Conservation District. So the provision in our agreement states that the Conservation District then has to refund or return $40,000 to us. The district is asking to strike that provision from the agreement because they're looking at using that money for some groundwater work as well as to replace 4 or 5 of those vehicles. If this is approved, then it would be $40,000 less in revenue that our county would receive. And Megan, if you'd like to come up and maybe just give a brief presentation as to
Sure.
what you're proposing.
All right. Good morning. So as some of you know, some of you may not know, the Ottawa Conservation District is an unfunded state mandate. So that means that the state, it requires us to exist, but doesn't provide us with any operational funds. We have 75 conservation districts in Michigan, and they all work a little bit differently based on this operational funding. Many districts have millages with their counties. Some run on donors, grants, fundraisers, that type of thing. Our district stands on several legs of funding. The first piece of that funding, the largest piece, comes from the county and the commissioners here at Ottawa. We also have grants that pay for our technical staff and the services and some of the services we provide. We also have a fee for service component where we can expand those services and charge a minimal fee to residents in order to do more work outside of our grant funded area, as well as we have our annual fundraisers. We have 3 of those. This agreement that was originally made back in, when I had come in 2015, I worked a lot with the former administrator and the county board on looking at funding the conservation district in a minimal fashion. At that time, it was $40,000. And we had in our agreement that if the state were to give funding back to conservation districts or fund conservation districts, that we would then refund the county for that funding. At the time we originally started to receive funding from the county, the district was really small, and we needed this to just basically stay alive and to keep our doors open. What has happened over the last 6 years is that your investment has enabled us to grow immensely, not just in our office, but our services that we provide. And one of the things I included into your packets was a return on investment that kind of shows you how, as your investment with us has increased, the amount of services we were able to provide in different environmental areas throughout the county. So agriculture, water quality, water quantity, invasive species, native restoration, reforestation, those type of things. We have aligned our goals directly with the county strategic goals in your master plan. Which is why a big focus now is on groundwater and your groundwater initiative here. We work closely with Paul Sachs and strategic development, as well in several of our other programs. We work very closely with Jason Shamlin and with Joe Bush in the Water Resource Commission. So we've become strong partners, and I don't just view us anymore as an organization that we're hanging on, but I view us now as an investment. We are able to provide services to the county that at the moment, there are no other departments in the county can provide. We're running into a small issue though. Our grants cover certain items, but they do not cover equipment such as vehicles, repairs, insurance, that type of thing. Right now, I have 16 full-time equivalent employees and a district budget of about $180,000. That budget, as I said, it includes several different legs, but mostly comes from the county. We have played around with the idea of looking at getting a millage, but have decided that the millage rate here and how you all view it, it's really important to keep that low. So the conversations I've had with the previous administrator was to keep to continue to have this type of investment rather than to have a millage. The state has had extra surplus funding. I was surprised and shocked that we got it because we've been lobbying for this for years, and excited that we got it. So I don't want to pretend that it's not a good thing. I don't think it's going to be a continued thing. It came in a form of a grant and not out of the restricted budget. I'm not sure that we'll have it again. If we do, then we need to have these conversations and probably adjust more permanently. But for this year, I would really like to ask, since this kind of came as a bit of a surprise to all of us, that we could use this money to invest into our vehicles and a little bit into the capacity of our groundwater campaign. Any questions?
Questions?
I just want to also agree with much of what Megan was just saying. If you were to see the vehicles that they have and the condition that they're in, one is they make sure that the person that drives that is aware of the fact that they may not get very far, and the rest of them aren't in too much better shape. So
we have 4 vehicles right now. We have a 2004 Chevy Colorado, a 2009 Ford Ranger, a 2002 Chevy Silverado, and a 2005 GMC Sierra. We have put over $9,500 in repairs in these vehicles over the last 14 months, and none of them were purchased for more than $5,700. We did this in increments, and we're able to do that, and we've all become kind of mechanics, so we know how to work on a vehicle. But I'm getting to a point where even if I sell them all, and with the market the way it is, I'm not going to be able to replace for much better than we have. So we've been talking about taking this funding, making the down payments, and financing these vehicles for the next 3 to 5 years, which is something the district could cover over that time period.
John, if we agree to this, it's a one-time deal. I mean, our ongoing contract with them isn't changing. If they get, say next year, they get 100,000 from the state.
Yeah, so what the request is to do this as a one-time only. I think what Aaron just mentioned, or Megan, sorry,
It's okay.
husband, is if this were to happen in the future, they may come back and say, hey, we'd like you to waive this provision again. And so Megan is correct. I think we started at 20,000 a year, and then starting in, I think 15 or 16, we went to 40,000, and then we went up to 80,000 in 2020, and then just this past year started at 100,000. So we have significantly increased our contribution. So again, if the board ultimately agrees to this, it means $40,000 less in revenue. Now, we didn't budget for that. We never budget to get this because this is the first time we got this. But as we prepare the budget for next year, it's 40,000 less revenue than we would otherwise have. But the intent, to answer your question, is we would do this for 1 year. And then if this situation arises again, it would have to go back before the board, and then you'd have to make that decision again.
Okay, thank you.
John, can you just explain that when you say 40,000 less revenue? I'm assuming this is just, how does the revenue side come into it as opposed to just we
So
continue with an expense?
So the current agreement is, right now we budgeted to spend $100,000.
Right.
And the current agreement says if they get additional state funding for their operations, and in this case, they are $40,000. Our current agreement says they have to then return $40,000 to us.
Okay, so we're talking about the same thing, we're just.
Yeah,
Expense
so-
versus, okay.
Would be reflected in our budget if the current
We would
agreement just goes.
continue
as-
spending the 40,000 or get 40,000 less in revenue.
Yeah, so in this case, we would be receiving 40,000 less in
Okay.
revenue than we otherwise would.
Any other questions? Thank you, Megan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Need a motion for the 2022 Ottawa County equalized values.
So moved.
Or questions, comments?
Got Brian or Mike here to give a brief summary on this.
Yeah, for one last time, then you'll have Brian. He'll do a better job anyways. What you're doing today, as you know, is setting county equalized values on this form for the county. Our department exists to assist you primarily with this, to analyze the market, review the roles, and see if we can accept the local units values as county equalized values. As you know, a few years ago, we had to add money to one class. This year, again, we've determined that you can't accept all the county's assessed values as local unit values as county equalized values, so that's what we're recommending. You've got this form to sign. There's also the 37 Cs, I believe, that show you're not adding to any value in any class, and those each go back to the local units for their roles. Just briefly, you've got the report there. This year, assessed value went up by 7.8 for a taxable 7.29. Last year was 4.43, before that 5 for taxable 5. So the 7 is quite a bit higher than it has been, but as we all know, the rate of inflation is probably going to be north of 8-9% this year. So it's not as good as it sounds. As far as the classes of property goes, agricultural, commercial, and industrial, the taxable went up more than the assessed value did. Those classes didn't get a very large increase in their market value this year, part of the pandemic holdover. And with the 3.3% increase in rate of inflation, it kind of balanced it out. Overall, real went up 8% and taxable went up 7.5, pretty good. Just as a note, I believe this is the last year. Is this when industrial all expired personal should all go to the state? So in 23.
Next year.
Yeah, for 23, that should be gone. There'll still be some that didn't apply for the exemption. And the consumer's power utility personal will still be there, but you've seen the value of the industrial personal going down over the years. Allegedly, we're getting reimbursed for that back to the 2013 level. What you and Brian are going to be dealing with next year is that there used to be an $80,000 exemption, and now it's going up to $160,000, I believe. So I don't know if they've determined if they're going to reimburse you for that, but that's coming. Well, the other thing we all probably know is that inflation has been pretty high. So for the rate they use for the 2023 rolls goes through October and back 2 years. And from what I can see, the inflation rate during that period is going to be north of 5%. And for our purposes, it's capped at 5. So the inflation rate will likely be 5%. Market value of the properties, we determine those from the end of March back 2 years. Those are already in the CAM. Those were good years. We should see similar increases in market value. What's still not to be determined over the course of this year is how much new construction. If interest rates go up, new construction could slide some. And also the sales could slide. You could get less for new construction and less for the uncappings perhaps. But, and Brian will run the numbers as the year goes by, but now it looks like you could get a 8 to 8.5% increase in taxable for 23 possibly. But and again, I can't imagine inflation is going to slow down, so. Just a rough estimate for now. And the last thing is just mildly interesting. The unit with the largest increase in taxable value was Wright Township, then Blendon Township, Talmadge Township. They're all kind of on the east side. And places like Georgetown that have massive increases before, I don't think there's much land left there, so that isn't subdivided. That's what I had for just a presentation. If there's anything else in the book you had questions for us about or any thoughts?
Any questions for Michael?
It's all Fenske's property.
Yeah.
I got a question, Michael. When
Yeah.
you're adding all these up throughout the townships and cities and villages and the county, all of our nonprofit, non-taxable properties, they're not in this equation?
Correct.
Okay, like Grand Valley University is not in there.
No.
Okay.
No, we don't appraise those. Because they don't pay taxes, we don't measure them. There's a theory that we should have on our, the assessor should have on the rolls, the value of Grand Valley State, all of these. I mean, we could measure them and come up with square foot, but who would buy Grand Valley in the first place? How do you come up with a realistic value for Grand Valley? Now, they may see some of that in the state. As Mount Pleasant, for example, I think they lost half their students in the last 10 years or something. They may see some closing, but it'd be hard to come up with a value for a school or a university, things like that. So
That'd be interesting because Ferrisburg City has about, they used to have 19% of their property was non-taxable. I think since Ottawa Sands, it's gone up to like 24 or 25% of
yes,
their land mass is non-taxable.
that would be an interesting number by unit, percent of the actual land that's taxable and what isn't. I
Yeah.
think Grand Haven City has a high, not that high, but a higher percentage of
Yeah.
exempt property.
Yes.
Yeah, it's nice to have all the parklands and the big stuff, but I mean, it's less that's being taxed, so.
Any other questions? Thank you, Michael, for the, I hate to say this, but for the last time.
Yeah, comes a time to step aside eventually. Well, thanks.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. In a motion for the 2022 Ottawa County Equalized Values, the L4037C form.
So moved.
Support. Questions, comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. In a motion for the Sheriff's Office personnel request.
So moved. Supported.
Val?
Good morning. This has been something that the sheriff has been talking about for months now, is our CIT program, and we were able to work with CMH and receive Bureau of Justice Assistance Grant for $549,000 over 3 years. Part of that is this position that we're bringing to you today. And it also will cover training for all of our staff, for our dispatch and all law enforcement staff in the county. And we're going to be doing that over 3 years. And you know that the crisis intervention team involves 2 CMH employees as well. We currently are using some staffing to assist right now, but this position would be a new position that would be embedded in that team to oversee the coordination of the service. So what we've been doing is since November 1 to March 1st, they have been on 132 calls in the county. And the stories of success have been quite amazing to see that not only that it's not just a dispatched type position. They hear it if they're working, because we don't have this on 24/7, but if they hear a situation come out with a mental health issue, they can go to that self-dispatch, but a lot of what they're doing is the follow-up. So what we find is when we're called usually from road patrol, it's usually at a point where someone is in crisis and they need the instant help at that time. If they're available, they go and take care of that. And a lot of the times that's just getting a safety plan in place till the next steps. And then it provides the time for the deputy to focus, to be able to go onto the road patrol and the CIT has more tools available to help the person long-term instead of just in that moment. So looking through some of the things that they've done, I actually had the opportunity to talk to someone that came up to me when I was at an event and asked me if I knew one of the deputy that's involved. And she told me a story and said she saved my niece's life. So that one story to me is a success of the program moving forward. And even looking at how we've done things, you know, we only have so many tools at 3 o'clock in the morning. Looking at the future of the program, talking to Lynn Doyle at CMH is looking at iPads that we would be giving out to deputies into the future to do telehealth. Because you think of, you know, we're very large for our county size, and to be able to provide those services, and the person doesn't have to leave their home to get a safety plan. So our deputy doesn't have to bring them somewhere, and it's hard for them, for the person as well. So there's a lot of great things that are coming from this grant, and this is just the beginning for us. And I know Lynn has also gotten some grant funds for some additional positions on her end as well. So right now, this is one position, and it's really a coordinator of the program as we move forward.
Questions for Bill? Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Bill. So just noticing that the cost on this was $123,000, we have a $500,000 grant. Is the idea that this position will be funded for 3 years? Maybe add on part-times if we have the opportunity?
Yeah, so this is really to get us started, and the 549 covers the position and the training over time, and then also training for the CIT coordinator, and it's for 3 years. And at that point, over the next few years, we'll probably be looking at adding, and I know Lynn really looking at like an afternoon type position, because the ideal thing would be to get to the point where we have somebody on every shift. Because unfortunately, you know, we don't have this just between Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And we have a lot of times the stuff is happening obviously at night. So looking at, there's actually additional grant funding that Lynn is looking at to also add as well.
And just noticing that there's a general fund cost of 30,000. Is that a tie-in with the grant that we need to contribute part of that from general fund?
So this grant was started, it was into the year, so we had to supplement some of the funds for that. Yeah.
But then for the following year, it wouldn't
Yes,
necessarily. have to do
it'll
that.
be, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Val? Thank you, Val.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Need a motion for the County of Ottawa financial report from Freideveld Hefner. So, Peter, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Peter Hefner, and I represent Freideveld Hefner, the firm of independent certified public accountants that conducted the audit for the county for the year ended September 30th, 2021. And I wanted to briefly walk you through some of the financial information. I understand that you have copies of the audit report. It's a little bit unusual, but I'm going to start at the very last page. So if you would go with me to page 186, this is information submitted to the federal government, and it provides a nice summary of the results of the audit process. I'm referring to page 186. As a result of having federal financial assistance being received and expended in the current year in excess of $750,000, you were required to have what is referred to as a single audit. That results in an audit of your financial statements as well as your compliance with federal requirements. And so on page 186, I just want to point out the opinion on your financial statements. It's referred to as unmodified. That is that your financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position, results of operations, cash flows where applicable of your governmental activities, your business type activities, each major fund, the aggregate component units, as well as the aggregate funds in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That opinion is provided on pages 1 and 2 of the financial statements. It's 2 pages long, and I'm summarizing the last paragraph on page 1. That's what we refer to as a clean opinion. So that's great. Also, we have to provide an opinion on your system of internal controls over financial reporting. That opinion, I'm not going to ask you to turn there, but that's provided on page 174. And we did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in your system of internal controls over preparing this report. Also, we provide an opinion on your compliance. In the current year, you expended, I believe, $21 million in federal financial assistance. We audited the compliance over 4 programs. One was the Food Commodities CARES Act, American Rescue Plan, ARPA, as well as some additional funding used for the pandemic. Those 4 programs were audited, and in that audit process, we did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in your system of controls over complying with the federal requirements. So those 3 opinions, I would say maybe that's the trifecta. They're all positive, and issues were not identified. We didn't identify any non-compliance as well with the federal grant requirements. So that's a summary of all of the opinions. And I thought if we turn through some pages, we could just take a look at some financial highlights as well. I'm going to ask you to start off on page 16. And so what we're going to look at is we're looking at your governmental activities. And we're just looking at the bottom line. So your general fund ended the year with $47 million in fund balance. Realize that that general fund being reported in your audit is made up of approximately 4 or 5 funds. One is a stabilization fund that includes $9 million in kind of a reserve. But end of the year, $47 million included in the general fund as reported in your audit. And then the other $20 million reported in the American Rescue Plan to be expended. That is realized as revenue as you expend it. So the cash balance was $20 million in the ARPA. And then you have your non-major governmental funds. You can see the bottom line down there, fund balance, approximately $20 million. So when we take a look across those $68 million in fund balance and realize that the ARPA funding is awaiting your determination on expending it as well. If you turn with me to page 18, this is taking a look at your governmental funds again, and I was just looking across the revenues. So the general fund, as reported in your audit, $86 million worth of revenues, approximately same amount of expenditures. Community mental health, $40 million expended. American Rescue Plan, where you realized or recognized $7.6 million in revenues, and that was the result of expenditures for public safety activities. And your other governmental funds, you can see revenues of $50 million. So across the revenues, $186 million in the current year. If you would turn with me to page 20. Now we're going to take a look at your business type activities, and that's the delinquent tax revolving fund. Ended the year with assets of $21 million. 18 of those dollars are in cash. And then we see your business type active or your internal service funds. That's the cost center where you accumulate dollars and expend dollars for shared services, shared vehicles, and your insurance authority. And you can see at the current year, current assets of $77 million. If you would turn with me to page 99, and I'm trying to hit the highlights, but I'm more than happy to try to answer any questions you have as well. On page 99, we're displaying, as required by generally accepted accounting principles, or I should say not we are, you are, as you prepare the financial statements. But on page 99, I just like to take a look at how your funding of your pension is coming along. The current year, you ended with a pension fund that has 80% funding. That is an initial liability of approximately $350 million and assets set aside and growing, $280 million for funding status of 80%. And if you turn 2 pages into the future, that results in a net pension liability. And on page 101, that's a look at your other post-employment benefit plan. Very much smaller than the pension. But I just wanted to point out that in the case on page 101, 101, your other post-employment benefit plan is overfunded. I wanted to point out that your staff prepares the financial statements. It's quite a project, and you pull in multiple entities like the Road Commission, Public Utilities, Water Resources, Land Bank, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to point out that this document solely prepared by your staff. I have 2 clients that prepare their own financial statements because it's a technical issue, and you have all types of operations for the most part. So kudos to your staff for pulling this information together, knowing how to report it, and pulling in all these entities as well. This is quite a project. And I appreciate what they do and pull it together. We would have to assign a significant additional staff to do that. It's more of a true audit from our perspective. We basically come in. Your staff has a myriad of schedules available for us. We look at those. We talk with staff throughout the year, ask them to prepare X, Y, and Z. And during the audit process, we just pretty much are auditing. We're not doing your accounting. We're not preparing your financial statements. We're not, compiling information. We're taking your information, breaking it down, auditing it, and providing the opinions. So thank you to your staff. Are there questions I can answer about the financial information, the audit, the process?
Any questions for Peter?
I just want to reiterate that Fiscal Services does a heck of a lot of work here. So just really kudos to Karen and her staff here, because if they had to prepare the financial statements, the bill would be significantly higher for them to do. So this is a lot of work, and the fact that it was clean opinions just speaks volumes for what Fiscal Services do. So thank you.
I want to echo that. I've been on this board almost 10 years, and I've seen the growth in Karen's job and the job that she's done. And I really appreciate the fact that you put this together.
Any other questions for Peter? Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
You're planning on coming to the board meeting next week as well, or?
Yes, typically I just provide a briefer summary and then just look for questions.
Okay, good. Sounds good. We'll
Thank
see you
you.
then. Thank you. Karen, you and your staff, thank you. You guys do a great job. Keep up the good work. So. Any other questions or comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Need a motion for the fiscal year 2022 budget adjustments.
So move. Support.
Anything special there, Karen?
Sure, so, I'm sorry, I lost my spot. So they're pretty normal budget adjustments. There was a one for during the budget process, we meet with departments and we review their budgets with them. And a lot of times we try to limit the number of they're planning for a number of things that can happen in their operations. And as we go through that, we try to hit a point where, okay, we're covering things that will happen. You'll be able to deliver your duties, but we don't want to plan for every terrible thing to happen. So we have a general fund contingency. Generally, it's set at $400,000 or $500,000 a year. And we try to handle those issues that come up in bulk. So not every bad thing that could happen happens every year, but every year usually some unplanned event occurs. When we were meeting with the prosecuting attorney during the budget process, they generally do not have a large budget for hiring expert witnesses. And they knew of a case that was coming up where they were potentially going to need an expert witness. And our advice to them at that point was, when that happens, when you have a better idea of what that need will be, come forward and we will request a budget adjustment from contingency to manage that with you. So it's just a relationship we've built up over time with departments so that we're not over budgeting for everything that could possibly come up. So there is a request for $141,400 from the general fund contingency for that expert witness for the prosecuting attorney's office. Other than that, I think most of the other ones are pretty standard grant adjustments and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Karen?
Yeah, I appreciate Karen's work on the issue, as well as Lee, your work and kind of getting me up to speed on this. The way I understand it, the 141,400 is for one report from one firm, correct?
Morning. Yeah, I'm here to answer any questions you might have today. I was going to give you a little summary of the case and that kind of thing if you needed the background. If you would like to hear that, I can do that. But yes, this is for one expert. This $141,400 is for one expert.
Okay.
There's been two issues raised on the appeal, essentially. One is there's new fire science available. We had to hire an expert to
Lee,
talk
do you
about
wanna
fire
maybe just-
science.
Maybe, I don't know who knows, but maybe just a brief summary of the case that
All right.
might make sense
All
of
right.
what experts.
Well, this is the case of the People versus Karen Bowes. It's from 2003. This is the case that we had out in Zealand where the mother started her house on fire and killed her daughter who was inside the house, and she was charged with murder. And she was convicted of first-degree murder back in 2003. This case has been appealed. She's exhausted all of her appeals, except this is her last possible shot here. And in order to be granted a new trial, she's already asked for a new trial and been denied. But if she can prove, if the appellate attorneys can prove that there is new science available or new evidence available, then they may be entitled to a new trial. And a new trial for us would be very difficult, of course, to put on. It'd be very expensive in and of itself to put on a new trial. We would still need these experts anyway. So in their appeal, they're trying to claim that there's new fire science because there was a lot of testimony at the trial about the fire, how it started, where it started, in order to be able to prove that Ms. Bowes was guilty of starting the fire and killing her daughter. So they're claiming new fire science, and that's one expert that we've already hired. That's already been approved by you. And that issue has already been dealt with. Joellen Haas back here was sitting next to me. Raise your hand. She's the one working on the appeal. And she's already handled that part of it, but now we have a new deadline of July 18 to handle the second issue in this appeal, which is basically, it's, I'll put it in quotes, false confessions is the issue here, that she made some incriminating statements during her interviews that we used at trial that they're now saying, based on new science regarding false confessions, that shouldn't have come in, and for that reason, she should be granted a new trial because there's new evidence that exists out there. What we are attempting to show and what we need the experts to show, they've got their experts they consider to be the best in the country on both the fire science and the false confession issues. We have to hire experts to counter what they've put in their brief already and what we expect those people to testify to. And that's not cheap. The fire science expert is $325 an hour. This false confession expert is $700 an hour. And you've been provided in your packet, an estimate as to why, what the potential cost would be, and that would be the $141,000. That figure. So without this information, without providing this to the court, chances are she'd be granted a new trial. Not sure if we could put a new trial on at this date. If we could, it's going to be very expensive. We're going to have experts for trial anyway. So our thought is get the experts now, counter their arguments now, defeat their motion for a new trial at this point. And we believe we can prevail. We believe what they're doing is they're calling old science just something new now. It's old science that existed before 2003 that they had available to them at the time this case was tried. It's nothing new now. They're just calling it something else. It's a same old stuff under a different name. And that's what we're attempting basically to show the court. Right now, this motion is in front of Judge Miedema up in our circuit court. We're hoping that she will agree with us and deny the motion for new trial. As soon as she does that, it's going to be appealed to the Court of Appeals, that decision. And we'll have to go ahead and fight it there when it gets to that point. But we believe we can be successful. And what we're just asking for is the resources that we need to be able to do our jobs effectively and stop this now so that we don't end up in a position where we're either having a new trial or we're forced to, if we can't put on the evidence, if we don't have the witnesses, we don't have the evidence that we needed, forced to maybe make some sort of agreement with her where we agree to a lesser charge and she gets released from prison. Because right now she's been convicted of first-degree murder and she's serving life without parole. And we don't want to be forced into a position where we have to do something less than that if we're forced into the position of having to have a new trial. So that's all we're asking for is just the resources that we need to do our job in this case. This is the first time we ever faced the Innocence Project. Hopefully we won't again. A lot of times I think what they do is they have pretty much unlimited resources. And I think they try to force county governments and people in my position to, by coming on strong with these expensive experts, and they know it's going to cost us a lot to defend against this appeal, just force us into making some kind of agreement, maybe a plea agreement with them or something of that nature. So I think that's just my opinion. That's what I believe they're doing in this case. I don't really think they have real solid grounds to prevail on their appeal. So, but we just need to be able to answer it, and it's expensive, and I regret that it's so expensive, but this is what we need. So we're just asking you to approve it.
Where did they get their money from for their experts?
I don't know. There's the U of M is behind the Innocence Project. They have 3 attorneys working on this appeal and also 3 law student attorneys is what they call them. And then I think they also have people from their law school classes working on this. So they've got a small army of attorneys basically working on this appeal. And we have one, Joellen Haas, is working on this appeal. She's taking on this small army of people from U of M. She's doing a great job. But I believe I don't know where their funding comes from. I assume it's probably some of its donations and grants. I'm not sure, but they seem to have sort of an unlimited pool of resources.
So if they lose, would we be funded?
That was John's question yesterday, and I don't believe in a criminal matter such as this isn't a civil case. In a civil case, you might be able to recover some fees and costs and so forth. In this case, I doubt that we would be able to do that. And I'm sure it's something that could be looked into, but unless we could prove that it was, without any merit at all, and there was, just frivolous filing on their part, I don't think there's really much we could do.
So for these attorneys that are fighting it or appealing, it's the experience that they're after, more or less. I mean, they're they're going to get paid as well, but
I think that's an aspect. I think they're looking for experience. Not only do they pick a case because they think they've got an issue there, but they also want their law students to have the experience of working on these types of cases and these appeals. Yeah, I think that's part of it too.
Any other questions for Lee? Thanks, Lee.
All right, thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Yeah,
Motion passes. Discussion items, corporate counsel paralegal position.
So just wanted to, and I'll let Doug take the lead on this, but with Doug indicating he's looking at retiring potentially at the end of this year. He was taking a look, we were taking a look at the organization of his office and the best way to provide legal services to the county. So we're looking at, and again, this is a discussion item at this point, not an action item, about potentially hiring a paralegal position to assist the corporation counsel. So Doug, if you want to kind of give a reasoning for that and how the current organization is now and how you're proposing to change that.
Yeah, when Al asked me to take over from Greg Rapley, part of my assignment was figure out what's going on with this department with an eye to institutionalizing it. He had a perception that it just wasn't well organized and it was too dependent on really one person. And so that was part of the charge when I took over the position. I committed to 1 day a week in the office, and it quickly became apparent that the job required more presence. Having an open door, whether it's to you coming in or to fiscal or to the treasurer or the sheriff's department, was critical to the functioning of the department. So I've largely spent most of my time here in West Olive since 2017. I quickly realized that having an in-house lawyer, because I've served as the outhouse lawyer for corporate counsel for Tuscola for 25 years, Nuevo for 25 years, and also for Calhoun County for about 5 years. That wouldn't be a good thing for Ottawa County. You have a need for someone that has a physical presence here every day. The other thing I realized, the office was a mess in terms of documents. I didn't know what ordinances you had adopted over the years. And so we've codified those ordinances. We have a new contracting process so that all contracts have the potential of being reviewed. During my tenure, what's happened in the legal profession is the role of support services has changed dramatically. There are no more legal secretaries anymore. When I started, a prominent lawyer, a partner, had the secretary placing the calls. So you would get a call from the secretary saying, will you hold for Mr. Shea? And then Mr. Shea would come on the line. And so a secretary was very personal. It was very personal to that partner. He or she would handle scheduling, would handle all the typing, would do the phones, would know where the lawyer is, how to get a hold of them, all of that. And that's what the office had. It had a secretary. But over those 40 years that I've been practicing, now lawyers know how to type. So you don't have typing as an issue anymore. We place our own calls. Actually, you don't get calls very often anymore. It's all email. You handle your own email. There's some filing that's still there, but it's no longer a personal position. So my assessment of the office, and I got delayed a little bit by COVID, which overwhelmed, all the tasks we were doing, was we do need an in-house lawyer. We only need one lawyer, not two. Kent has 3 or 4. Even though they're twice the size, I don't think we'll need another lawyer for years to come. One lawyer can handle it. There are ongoing needs, though, for contract reviews, making sure, particularly we don't have a few clauses in the proposed contracts, like I hate automatic renewals. They're a trap. You get caught in there. So looking at every contract, making sure if there's an automatic renewal, the department has it scheduled so that you don't let that potential lapse. And Foia. you've got an email from the Holland Sentinel this week. There's a need in our FOIA response to have someone outside. The Sheriff's Department does a really good job with handling FOIA, but there is a structural need to have someone that knows that statute inside and out that can help the Sheriff's Department when they're overwhelmed or when they have certain big FOIA assignments that, such as the one that triggered that estimate. And so there really is a need for a paralegal, probably a degreed position, someone that can provide the additional contract review, can flag contracts that are problematic because of certain clauses to corporate counsel, that can also assist in making FOIA decisions and exemptions and helping out where the departments are struggling to get their FOIA needs met. Another key concern that I have is because you only have one professional, what happens if that professional leaves, dies? You know, is the county in a position where you've got some institutionalized presence? And a good paralegal can help fill the gap. A good paralegal can know what lawyers we have from the outside that are assisting the county, and during that absence, if there is an absence, can help John or whatever secure those legal services on an ongoing basis. So structurally, if we're only going to have one lawyer, we need a separate paralegal, in my opinion, that can serve institutionally to bridge different tenures in corporate counsel. Greg was here for 25 years. I doubt we're ever going to have another corporate counsel that'll be here that long. And so I think it's very, very important that there be some continuity in the office, someone that's here before and hopefully after, or if they leave, then you find someone again that's not personally associated with that lawyer, but that can provide that institutional knowledge and service that's critical to the position. So that's what I'm looking for. I know we have a person in that position, respectful of that, but long-term, that's the structural office as I see it for the next 10, 15 years. One lawyer, one paralegal, and hopefully some institutionalization so that the office can continue to function if you lose one or the other.
What's Lisa's title right now?
I don't know.
Legal secretary?
Probably. She functions as a secretary. You know, that's where her experience is. As a traditional legal secretary, Greg didn't do any typing. So Lisa had to generate everything for Greg. And I do all of my own typing. So that function no longer exists for her. She's been invaluable to me because frankly, the office was a complete mess. In helping me figure out what we have, how we've organized it. But, you know, we need to be in a position, I think, to get this person on board. And I want a period of time where I can train that person so that they can provide the assistance that I think the office will need when my successor comes in. And we have no idea what we'll get when we apply, we hold out the applications for my position. And the legal profession's changing rapidly. Most big firms now don't have municipal corporate work and lawyers because the rate structure, I mean, we got an expert here at $700. But even in Grand Rapids, most corporate lawyers that are at $500 to $700 an hour. You can't charge that in the municipal sector. So all the large firms have given up on the municipal practice. When I started, it was a $50 difference per hour. You could do that ethically. Same work, public sector, okay, we got a little bit of a discount because of that. Now the large firms have said, we can't charge our corporate clients in the private sector $500 an hour and then charge for the same service, our municipal clients, 200, 250. So they've gotten out of the business. So there aren't attorneys of my experience working with public entities really available anymore. So that's going to be a challenge for us to find someone to replace me that has that kind of public sector experience, that's worked in a larger environment and has some of the capabilities of serving the sophisticated departments that we have here. Because it's a breadth of, whether it's real estate and parks, or it's, the prosecutor's office, and I can affirm that you need experts to do cases. And if we have to retry it, we may end up with our public defender having to provide those experts. That's another expense. I'm glad you approved it, because if that comes back to us, we've got probably, we've got extra time in the judicial side and maybe the public defender's side too. And having a lawyer corporately that understands, that context that can help support those agencies is important. And getting some of these other services offloaded would also be critical.
And Greg, I think just to follow up maybe on your question with Lisa, she's either a legal secretary or maybe a legal administrative assistant, something along those lines. I think what we're looking at is she could help with the transition. She's indicated to me that she was looking at retiring about a year from now, next spring. And so she could help with the transition. And then when she does retire, we would essentially eliminate that position and then just have the paralegal position.
So would you say that a paralegal has more training, more education than what is going on right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you need to be able to understand a little bit about contract law and Foia, so that you can right away look at, well, we'll have an exemption like that. Or, we have a tremendous volume of contracts that get thrown through the on-base system. And I try to look at every one. I couldn't spend the time, frankly, fly specking each contract, but I look for term and I look for renewals and I look for, can we get out of it if we don't like it? You look at what happened in Muskegon County, and they terminated the contract and they ended up with $4 million exposure on a breach of contract claim because their lawyer got them into a mess. They didn't terminate the contract properly. So it's an area that requires attention, and it requires some pre-contract before you enter into it, review of what we have. But you can look for the key clauses. There's about 7 or 8. And someone can be trained as a paralegal to look for those and then flag those for the lawyer. That's what I would envision. Hey, I don't like this provision. What do you think? Or this concerns me. What do you think? And then they can step in and do that. So if I were to, have a heart attack right now and be out, there would be no one here that's capable of reviewing those contracts. And you'd have to go outside to get that review. And so that's the hole I'm trying to fill, is if I had a heart attack or my successor left or I had a heart attack, would we have someone in place that can keep the contract flow going? Because those have to, Karen knows this, that's constant, as we're always reviewing and pushing those contracts forward.
Do other counties have just a single person that does contracts all the time, like the big counties? Would that be a single job? Or is there enough for that?
Yeah, I don't know what Kent does, to be honest with you. Allegan, just found this out when we had the 911 issue, now has an in-house lawyer. That's a first for them. I don't know what their job duties are. I would think that that's an important part of any large county corporate counsel office. So Oakland has like 17 lawyers. Wayne has probably 20 lawyers. Washtenaw has 1, like we do. I don't know if they have a paralegal or not. But yeah, that, Phil, that's a function. Is it a full-time function here? No. There's not enough contract requirements to be full-time. But it's an important job that needs to get done.
So when we rehire for your position, are we gonna, how will we post that, John? Or Marcy?
I mean, I think you could obviously put on the website. I know I'd probably talk to Doug as to how other law firms hire their attorneys, and maybe there are, and I'm speculating, nations or journals or websites where attorneys looking for jobs would most likely post for that. I did want to bring up, because the question was posed to Doug, and is just to clarify, when you retire, does it make sense for the incoming or the new corporation counsel to select a paralegal versus, having one in place now?
Yeah, I'm trying to make it not a personal, obviously, when you have two people, they need to get along in the department. There's no question about that. But apart from that, I want this to be an institutionalized position. I think it's a great opportunity for someone that has like a bachelor's degree that wants to come in and work for 20 years. I would hope that we can recruit someone that loves the position, loves doing that, that could be here for 20, 25 years and provide that kind of presence, no matter what's happening at the top of the food chain in that department. So, yeah, if it were a secretary position, in the old days when the judge got elected, they brought in their own secretary. It was very personal. But even in law firms now, I don't know of any lawyer that has their own secretary, one secretary. Now you typically have 4 lawyers on one assistant. That's how much things have changed and how this position has morphed. So I don't see it as a personal position anymore, other than in a small department, you need to get along. If they don't get along, that will be an issue. But I'm trying to depersonalize it, honestly.
So if we had a paralegal and an attorney, we wouldn't be hired into a corporate like you, Doug? Is that what you suggest? We still would go through a corporate and then have a paralegal here too?
I think you need, I'm not suggesting that Ottawa County can get by with just a paralegal. I think you need both, but, my first job was for Notre Dame's general counsel, and ironically, Greg, to your question, my first legal assignment was their bookstore was assessed by South Bend, because South Bend took the position it was a commercial apparel store. And so I worked for that office. It was a structural institutional office of general counsel for Notre Dame. We're large enough now where I don't think we need multiple lawyers, but you do need one lawyer that can sit in that office and entertain. The sheriff comes to see me probably 3 times a week with something. And that's a counseling thing that you wouldn't expect a paralegal to be able to provide. So the counseling function of what I do, the more larger strategic stuff, is still a legal position that requires an in-house corporate counsel. But Foia and contract particularly are areas where a true paralegal, legal assistant, if you will, could be very helpful and could get us through if you happen to lose that top position.
I think to expand on this a little bit too, looking at the bigger picture with this office, Doug is our corporation counsel. He also handles our litigation. And Doug and I have had a lot of conversations that it's hard to find one person that has the strengths to do both of those, because those are 2 different roles. So I think one of the things we looked at was, in addition to the paralegal, replacing Doug when he retires with a in-house corporation counsel. But when we deal with litigation, that might be something where we enter into a contract with a law firm to handle litigation. Because sometimes the skill set that a corporation counsel will have may be an attorney that doesn't often try cases. And conversely, a litigator is very comfortable in the courtroom, may not have the skill set for handling the day-to-day corporation counsel activities.
Kind of like we had before Greg retired, right?
Yeah,
Pretty much.
Was it? Yeah, I don't.
honestly, they are two different skill sets, two different personalities out there. One can claim, John has to pull me off on some of the corporate stuff and say, Doug, just ratchet it down a little bit. This is your corporate counsel hat, not your litigation hat. And there's some validity because litigation is a very aggressive, you need to be aggressive, you get rolled over. So you need an aggressive personality, you need an aggressive approach. And that doesn't always work with corporate counsel type activities. So if there's, you can look at my performance over the last 5 years, maybe say at times I'm too aggressive, for what you would want out of corporate counsel. That's certainly a potential issue. So it is a two different functions. I have some unique experiences in both, but you're not going to replace that. Like Kent doesn't do that, for example. Their lawyers don't do any litigation.
Well,
And
Joe,
same in Washington.
Doug has.
Go ahead, Doug.
Oh, no.
No, go ahead. I saw you put your hand up several
No,
times.
I'm just trying to
Trying
clear.
get your attention.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, we're gonna get off this iceberg over here.
Yeah.
So the idea is moving away from you and Lisa to a situation where we have a paralegal who is more than Lisa, I guess, is what in layman's terms, plus a corporate counsel, plus contract for litigation. And
Yeah, it's not Lisa's fault. When she entered that position
Right.
30 years ago, it was different.
right. Okay. And then how would that affect Foia again? The paralegal would have more involvement in Foia than Lisa does currently.
Yeah, Lisa's great. She pulls them off the webpage.
Okay.
The ones that go to the sheriff's department go right to the sheriff. There's a good divergence from their entry point. But, and then she will contact the department and say, here, we got this FOIA, can you get the documents for a simple FOIA? And then it comes back and I send that out. For a more complicated one, it all goes to my desk, which is fine. But having someone that understands, for example, yesterday, I told the Holland Sentinel, you can't ask questions. That's not a FOIA, Now, with the media, I like to answer questions because we want a good relationship. But they don't often understand that FOIA isn't an you don't send an interrogatory out. And they want to know how many FOIAs do you get? Well, we don't keep that tally, to be honest with you. So that wasn't easy. I told her respond that we don't have a document that says that. So my vision would be that the paralegal could send out that denial right away, saying this isn't even a FOIA request.
And how would that paralegal work with clericals? I know you talked a little bit about that, obviously staffing issues with FOIA, but would that augment the clerical side as well? Or how would that,
Yeah, so
having a
I hate
paralegal?
to say that I do my own clerical, but honestly, I generate FOIA letters. John corrects my spelling all the time because I'm not very good at spelling, but on my opinions, I do all the clerical, I do the whole opinion. I have a structure.
And we can move away from having corporate counsel working on that and kind of,
Clerical position,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
That's
So
what
maybe
I-
adding clerical to the paralegal, or you wouldn't go that far?
The paralegal can handle the clerical.
Okay.
And that's typically what you have now. In the private sector, we call them legal assistants, not secretaries, not paralegals. They're a legal assistant. They can draft some documents. They do some billing like paralegals. They also handle what might have been viewed as what's left of the traditional clerical position of the secretary.
Thank you.
Doug, are you an independent contractor?
Are you?
Right now?
Yeah, you employee of the county.
No, so the idea when we started before COVID was that I would spend like 3 years, 2 or 3 years as an independent contractor. And then eventually ditch the rest of my practice and come here as an employee for a couple of years and then move on. Unfortunately, with COVID, I also had some things like with Plainfield Township and Cascade on the PFAS, that got disrupted. And so I am still, the way I started, I bill for my time as corporate counsel. The big difference is I'm here more than I'm not, which was
Going
different from what
forward, then,
Alan.
would your recommendation be that we still stay with an independent contractor
No, I think they should be an employee.
full time? The attorney's job would be here. Nothing
Absolutely.
but- Okay.
Yeah.
So, would we do comparables on to find in the budget what we're gonna do for paralegal assistant with other counties, you think, or how would you go about that?
Yeah, we've been drafting first of all, a job description, and we haven't put a pay grade yet on it. This is why this is a discussion item at this point. And then I think we would try to see what the market bears for that in terms of what that pay grade would be. So I'm not prepared to tell you, oh, it should be pay grade number
Right,
X. But
we don't know what the market is.
Right, that's
market
something-
period, yeah.
and I don't want to speak for Marcy too much, but I know that they'll take a look at those at market comparables to determine what's an appropriate pay grade for that position. So we've done some work on what the actual job would be. We just haven't filled in that blank yet. And our intent is when we do, we would be bringing that back to the finance committee as an action request. This is again, just a discussion item. But we wanted to have this discussion first, let you know, here's kind of how we see our vision for this office. And if that looked good to you guys, then we would then finalize that job description with the pay grade based on our research on that and bring that back before you as an action request, then ultimately to the board.
So would we kind of do both of them at the same time? So we know we're gonna pay a full-time attorney and the paralegal assistant? And then the corporate would go out for bids?
Yeah, I think right now we're probably further along on the pathway with the paralegal. So I don't know if they'd come at the exact same meeting, but we would be doing something similar for corporation counsel and having to do the same thing. What would we pay a corporation counsel? It'd be a little bit different than with Doug, just because right now Doug does everything, litigated, corporation counsel. Here we would not. And so there we may look at what other counties do in terms of not only paying their corporation counsel, but also confirming what are those job duties? Are they just corporation counsel, or do they also get involved in litigation to make sure we're
So when we go out for, it would go out for bids for corporate though, right? You almost have to, it's a government.
No, I think what you do is you put out
a job post?
a job post.
It'd be an employee position.
As a corporate too? That
Yep,
would-
as corporation counsel, yeah.
You're talking litigator?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh,
that'd be different, right?
oh, I'm sorry. When you said corporation counsel, I'm thinking the
I know,
in-house.
I'm thinking.
No, I think litigation, I think we would put proposals out there and we would want to probably, I would assume, interview those. So it's not just, I don't think that's something you necessarily want to just say, well, whoever's got the lowest hourly rate, that's who we're taking.
No.
I think we want to have that as a factor, but not the factor, and interview those firms to see who we are comfortable with, if they have a same philosophy in terms of how they try cases.
I like the idea, because I kind of got my ear chewed last time that we just, I was fine with taking Doug on, but they're like, hey, you know what? But you worked for us before, so it's kind of how we went over. But
Yeah.
when Greg quit, I know there was a few attorneys that, as commissioner asked me, hey, why didn't you bid this out? I just want to make sure we do it this time.
Joe?
Yeah.
So Doug, you talked a little bit about municipal attorneys being few and far between. Do you see that becoming less and less of more and more of an issue in the future? And if that's the case, is that something where I think a few years ago that it seems to me that Grand Haven asked for some help with because they had a city attorney that was on call. And didn't the county fill in some of that for a while? I don't remember exactly, but I'm just thinking about, last night I was at Spring Lake Village, for instance, and they have an attorney that is always there. And that's gotta be fairly expensive. And I wonder how much longer that's gonna be available. And is that something where perhaps as a county that we might be able to provide those services like we do some of the other services in the future?
For the litigated part or for the corporation counsel?
For the council part,
The
or
interest-
it might be for the litigation part or whatever. I'm just thinking, are they gonna be able, are municipalities, townships gonna be able to afford to have a counselor available at their meetings, for instance?
The interesting thing is there's a significant difference between county law and local governmental law. Local governmental law is dominated by zoning and land use. That, as John knows, it's city attorney, that's a big part of what they do. County law is significantly different when you have the treasurer's office, you have, Parks Department, we have sheriff is even different than police. So
So in answer to my question, it's
the
not
answer
really.
is no. It
Yeah,
really, it's probably
realistic.
not going to be
Yeah.
an office that you can say, well, our corporate counsel can provide you.
Sure.
On Foia and on Open Meetings Act, those are similar, but other than that, it's kind of a different animal. It's like a podiatrist versus, a knee surgeon.
They're kind of thinking like the sheriff department and the equalization,
equalization.
aren't you, Roger? Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So, just based on this, we'll, with the paralegal position, we'll kind of finalize that job description, do some research on the pay grade and so forth, and then bring that back to the finance committee.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Good. Good morning, Amanda. It's good to see you in person.
It's good to be seen.
Speaking of litigation, are you going after the road commission or the township or anything,
No, don't you have immunity for something like that? You can blame it on Mother Nature, so can't sue her. Just a couple of things on this one pager today. As you all know, inflation's hit 8.5%, it's the highest in about 40 years. The core CPI is at 6.6, which is what urban consumers have for most of their goods and services, except for food and energy. So, thank you. Other than that, I just want to mention that the brokers that I talked to are pricing in about 8 increases this year alone, and 2 or 3 of them might be 0.50% or basis point increases. So we're going to see a lot of movement from the Fed, probably 2 or 3 next year as well. And on the back of this sheet, I think this is a really interesting chart that I found on Monday. Way off to the right, you'll notice this orange bar. And so you can see, if you go down under or above January, you can see how much gasoline was taking up. But now, I believe that's the right color. Gasoline and all types is just exploding in how much it's costing. Natural gas has doubled in the cost in the last 3 months. So we're just really experiencing a lot of impact to the market and probably exacerbated by the war. So just wanted to point those things out. March is a very active month in the treasurer's office. We first have settlement. So all the local units, you've paid your property taxes to the local units, and then we go ahead and make them whole from our delinquent tax revolving fund so that we carry all the delinquent taxes now. It's kind of like we we give them the money, they hand all their taxes to us, and it's our job then to collect all those delinquent taxes. So in settlement, was all managed really well. We paid out about $6.1 million to the locals, which is a touch smaller than it was last year. I think it was 6.2 million. It's very normal. And then we had 7 foreclosures this year, 6 gap parcels and 1 vacant lot. We worked extremely hard with not a lot of people. We had about 20 exemptions from foreclosure, but we worked really hard with those folks. And a lot of them are applying for this program that I've mentioned before, the MyHalf program that the federal government funded. Just continuing ongoing health issues with a lot of people. Yeah, that seems to be overall the healthcare costs that people are experiencing when they're coming to us, that they haven't been able to pay their taxes. So we continue to work with them. One gentleman came in and said, "Oh, I'm just so glad I came in. I didn't realize you could help me so much." And that's what we want to hear all the time. We want to be able to help people. So,
Amanda,
yeah.
To that point, would that be a good subject for the newsletter? The county next newsletter that goes out?
I think it would be a good, you'd have to time it well. I'm not sure the cycle of the newsletters, but when people start to get to that panic point and they can read that, that would be a good thing to have in there. We are always surprised at how infrequently people completely read through the materials that they're sent, especially about their delinquent taxes. And so there's lawsuits out there. Doug can tell you, we have several class action lawsuits by people not reading documents they've been sent by our office to apply for certain timelines. So, but I think that's a great idea. If we can figure out, it'd probably be later in the year, maybe in a November, December timeframe. That would be really great. I'll follow up with Shannon about that.
Yeah. Good.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you much. 2022 equalization report. Brian and Michael, you got anything additional to?
No, nothing additional.
Okay. Second opportunity for public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.